Welcome to Perspectives Matter. I'm your host, Vince Pocenti. In the age of hyper-transparency, brand reputation isn't just a reflection of what you sell, it's a referendum on who you are. Today, we're exploring the brands that face us and their moments of truth. When public trust erodes, when leadership falters, or when a single tweet headline throws years of brand equity into question, what happens next? Today we'll be talking about what's really going on when brands experience a crisis. To help us make sense of it all, I'm joined by two industry authorities who've helped organizations navigate both the spotlight and the storm. Bruce Turkel is a branding expert and author of All About Them, which dissects the starkly different ways, in this case, Johnson & Johnson and Uber handled crisis. He's guided both Fortune 500 companies and entrepreneurial ventures on how to build brands that endure. Laura Culp is the founder of Culp Branding, where she helps businesses sharpen their messaging and steer through times of crisis. Her work focuses on brand integrity, voice, and strategic repositioning. Let's begin with Bruce. Now, Bruce, in your book, you explore how Johnson & Johnson's decisive response to the Tylenol crisis built trust, while Uber's reactive stance eroded it. What does it say about the role of leadership in brand credibility?
Simply put, Vince, leadership is everything. People believe that brands are based on the function of a product or a service, but in fact, brands are based on the values conveyed by the companies and, more importantly, the people who run them. Everything a company does comes from the values and directions of leadership, whether that's good or bad. And consumers, users, end users, clients, customers are all looking to identify themselves based on the brands, the products that they purchase and use. We used to say people buy what you do, but today people buy who you are. And leadership is the way they determine that.
When it comes to brands, how foundational is trust to this equation?
Well, for many, many decades, people have defined brands as a promise. I continue to like that definition. I mean, there's some evolutions of definitions, but what I've always liked about it is that it shows how vulnerable a brand is and how precious a promise is and how easy it is to, it takes years to build trust and then it takes like a minute to lose it. So if a brand breaks its promise, do you like when someone breaks a promise with you? No, you don't. Consumers don't either. So trust is very important, and brands are all about making promises and keeping them.
So yeah, they can't break that trust.
They cannot break it.
Bruce, Tesla once represented innovation and sustainable future. Has the brand become inseparable from Elon Musk's personal image? And is that asset or a risk too big to ignore?
There's so many questions wrapped up in that very simple question, Vince. But of course, the brand is absolutely tied to Elon Musk. There's no question that anybody who drives the car or bought the car knows who was responsible for putting it in their driveway. And you're absolutely right. It stood for innovation. It stood for sustainability. It stood for saving the world. And Musk has proven in his activities of recently that that's not his concern. So now you have this big disconnect between the reason people bought the car and now what the car is saying about them. And people don't like that. You like to think, again, that the car, they purchased it because of its function. But the truth is, any car will get you from point A to point B, and it'll do it safely and quickly and efficiently. And electrical cars will do it without you having to put gas in them. So little by little, the differences between products is diminished. And what happens is the brand, the promise, as Laura put it so well, becomes stronger and stronger. And when that no longer feels true, when it no longer is congruent with what the product is, who the leader is, and what their activities are, then all of a sudden people start to wonder why they are being seen in this product. And a lot of them don't like it.
So, Laura, a crisis breaks and leadership has a choice to make. And in engaging with the outside world, what should leadership do?
Well, first, I think they need to not only understand what happened, but why it happened. If there is a public outcry, and typically there is, they need to know where that's coming from. We talk a lot about brands, but brands are companies, and companies are full of people, and people are full of emotions. And so I always recommend, if they at all can, absolutely should find a third-party crisis manager to come in, someone who's dispassionate and is less tied to the emotional outcome, and can help give some really good advice, because in these situations, cool heads prevail. Smart companies normally know who to call and already have like a plan in place in case something were to go wrong. But you're absolutely right. You cannot freeze. You have to move to action very quickly.
Now, Bruce, you've said that the brand isn't what a company says, it's what customers believe. So when belief shifts negatively, how can a company start rebuilding that connection?
Well, what you just asked Laura, and she answered correctly, is the key. You don't start when something happens negatively. You start when you're building your growth plan. It's called the fire extinguisher paradigm. A fire extinguisher in a hardware store, I don't know, costs $5 or $10. That's all. A fire extinguisher, when your car is on fire and somebody drives by, you give them $50 or $500 for it. A fire extinguisher after the car has burned and it's now just a charred crisp has no value at all. And it's the same with crisis management. A company that is thinking about their growth, thinking about their stockholder value, has crisis management already in place. They don't know what's going to happen, but they do know something's going to happen. And so they've already put together the plan and the programming. They already know what's going on, and they know that something big, something public, and something that is demonstrable has to happen. And they've already put those different scenarios together, and then they're just waiting to figure out which is the best one to use. Well, clearly, the company we're talking about here either hasn't thought about it or doesn't care. Remember that leadership also has to care about what happens in order to do something and to do something important. And if they don't care, or they just disregard it, then there's really very little they can do.
That sounds great for a large company, so I'm going to take a left turn here again. Is that the case with a small company? Let's say they have a donut shop and they're trying to do their best. Are they also going through that fire extinguisher methodology?
Well, of course, if you have a donut shop, it does take some time that you should think about what happens if somebody gets sick from one of our donuts, somebody chokes in our store and news media happens by, and then that gets on camera. What happens if zoning changes? What happens if you need to go through these scenarios. You need to spell them out. You need to know what to do. Unfortunately, in that scenario, a retail environment, what usually happens is that the lowest paid employee is the person who deals with the public and the press, because that's who's standing behind the counter when the reporters show up or when 911 shows up. And those people are not trained, nor should they have been, to actually get ready to handle these events. But the effect that they have can be disastrous. It's not expensive to do it up front. It's very expensive to try to do it afterwards.
Laura, when mistakes happen in a company, what do you recommend in the early hours for a brand to get ahead of a situation?
Oh man, those first few hours really do matter, for sure. As Bruce said, they should hopefully already have some semblance of a plan in place, because you can't freeze. Crisis management 101, you want to stay ahead of the story. You don't want to react. You want to redress and reframe. So certainly you want to move quickly.
What are the most common mistakes, though? What are those kind of mistakes that you just see all the time?
Freeze, knee-jerk reaction. Oftentimes, especially if it's a founder-led company, don't apologize or take accountability. Sometimes don't. Or don't do it in a way that feels authentic. I think those are the top three that you see, and it's hard. I mean, if you think about it, to be in a crisis, these are all humans. They're doing the best they can, but it really does help if you have a plan in place.
Bruce, let's switch over to you. Given what Laura said, and we've seen public apologies land both powerfully and poorly. So, what makes an apology credible? So, can you point to one that succeeded versus one that backfired?
So Laura used the word. She said apologize genuinely. When she said don't apologize, I don't think you heard what she meant. She meant a mistake is to not apologize, not that you shouldn't apologize. You absolutely should. You take accountability. That's what I heard her say. You take accountability, you apologize, but you do it genuinely. Here's how you can tell. It's very simple. You can use this in your life. This isn't just about branding. If someone starts an apology with if or but, it's not an apology. Hey, Vince, I'm really sorry if you were upset by what I said. Does not mean I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for the way you took it. That means I just took the blame that I should be responsible for and I put it on you. I'm not sorry I said it. I'm sorry you took it badly. If I say, Vince, I'm really sorry for what I said, but you need to understand what was going on in my head, I just disavowed all responsibility. I just said, I'm saying I'm sorry, but I'm telling you that it's because of something else. And you will see this time and time again. Somebody on the news, somebody in an interview program will say, you're absolutely correct. But what you need to understand, and as soon as they use the word but, they are no longer apologizing. Now, nobody knows to do that unless they've been trained. There are crisis managers, there are media trainers who can train the people who will be front and center to know what to say. Here's a perfect example. In your company, do the people who work for you know that they're not allowed to speak to the press and give opinions? They can't say no comment because that's just as bad, but all they need to say is, I'm sorry, I'm not the person you should be talking to. I need you to give Vince a call. He's the manager and he can handle this for you. Most companies haven't even told their employees that. So a reporter calls, someone shows up with cameras. What happens? First of all, people are excited to be on camera. Second of all, we're taught to answer questions, to tell the truth. And the truth that we tell may not be exactly what's going on. This needs to be handled in a business-like manner with training, with expectations, and with all of the opportunities laid out carefully.
How do we get in front of things when our default is to wait until the crisis? Is this something we need to, maybe that's the reason for this program, right? A reminder about that. But what are your thoughts?
The best time to plant an oak tree is 20 years ago or right now. Yeah. So the fact that you haven't done this yet doesn't mean you shouldn't do it before the next business day. Of course, we're all, as business people, we're all busy. We're all running around with our heads cut off. We're all trying to do 100 things. However, there are things you don't miss doing. You don't not pay your payroll tax. We all know you have to pay payroll tax. We don't not fill out all of our regulatory documents. We don't not return annoyed or angry client or customer calls immediately. We know to do that. This is something else you need to know. The thing is, it's not hard. It's not difficult. It's quite simple. A good crisis manager can take you through a process and get you ready to deal with a problem when it happens. It's just like insurance. You know, nobody wants insurance, but we understand why we need to buy it.
Okay, Laura, when the dust starts to settle, the crisis has happened, the dust starts to settle, where should a company start when they're talking about reestablishing their brand loyalty and making sure that the confidence is still there with their consumer or customer?
Well, I always suggest to my clients to go on a listening tour. Listen, do some research, figure out, think about who your fans were before and ask them how they're feeling and what, touch base with them. And then also touch base with your employees. How are they feeling? And then as best as you can, pick up the pieces, keep the values you had in the beginning as a company. Companies are founded on values, your belief system, and lean into what you had. And then in the meantime, you do have to stay in constant contact. Like I think about Chipotle, like in 2015, they're a brand that's based on fresh and healthy for a fast casual restaurant. And then, they had an E. coli outbreak and they gave people norovirus. So they had to go back to the basics. They had to apologize. And then they had to implement new safety procedures and tell people about them. So they managed after 3 or so years to get back on top, but it was that constant communication with their customers. It was listening to their customers and, reestablishing that brand promise, going back to the promise and making sure that they upheld it. They hired people that specialized in food safety until they were able to back up that promise and reestablish that we really do care about freshness. They put their money where their mouth was.
Oh, I get it. All right, Bruce, some brands not only survive crisis, they emerge even stronger. Can you share an example of where a brand turned adversity into long-term momentum?
The absolute textbook example is Tylenol. You might recall that somebody had laced some Tylenol bottles in a store somewhere in the Midwest with poison. And Tylenol's response to that was absolutely epic and textbook. The first thing they did was they took all Tylenol off the shelves. They didn't just take it in the affected stores, they didn't just do it in the region, they did it everywhere. That's the kind of action that tells people this matters. They then tested all of the product. They discarded all of the existing product, even though there was no proof that any of it had been tampered. But they did this all publicly. They then invented the tamper-proof cap to demonstrate that they were moving forward with actions that were going to ensure the safety of the public. They did everything right. They did it in public. They didn't shirk away from responsibility. They didn't pass the blame and say, well, this was some crazy person in store number 715. They took full responsibility and they made it clear that this is what mattered. In a strange metaphor, you could say that they had a product that took away pain, and they took away the pain of doing business with them. And by doing that, their business actually came back quickly and came back more powerfully because people felt even better about the product after this happened than before. They understood that this company did whatever it took. Damn the torpedoes, don't worry about budgets, open checkbook. Let's get this right to make sure that you can trust us. It was beautiful, and it was years and years ago, and yet people are still talking about it and still teaching it because it was a textbook example of what to do.
Bruce, what can our viewers do in their business to apply these ideas?
Well, the first thing you've already heard from both of us, the first thing is to have a plan, to be ready. Don't wait for the shoe to drop. It's going to drop. Something's going to happen. That's called life. So the first thing to do is to have a plan. The second thing to do is to make sure that everybody in your organization understands how this works and what's required. They understand how important their part is in handling something properly. And this has to be part of regular training because people come into companies and they leave companies. People remember things and then they forget things. So this has to be part of a regular training program. If you meet with your employees on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, or you do quarterly Zooms, whatever you do, there needs to be a few minutes where you talk about how important this is. Number 3, people need to know what their values are, what they stand for. They can't simply be brand tenants that were written by an ad agency or a design firm or a brand management company. They actually have to be the values of leadership, the values of the company. And people have to understand that if they act within the requirements of those values, their jobs are protected, that they're doing the right thing if they promote those values, so that when something happens, they don't have to wonder about what they ought to do. They know exactly what to do. And when they don't know what to do, they know exactly what set of values to use to make their decisions. None of that costs very much money. None of that requires you to buy new equipment. None of that requires you to have certifications. It simply means you have to talk to the people who are pushing your brand forward on a daily basis.
Bruce, you touched on Tesla. Give us a picture. You're running Tesla now. What would you do moving forward? And good luck.
Well, the liability with Tesla is not the product. People seem to love the product. I don't have one, so I can't answer only other than anecdotally. The problem is that the company, based on the person who runs it, has taken such a strong partisan, one-sided position that lots of people want nothing to do with them anymore. I don't know what they can do at this point besides removing the problem. If in fact Elon Musk wants the company to remain successful, to continue to grow, for shareholder value and trust to increase, he has to remove himself from the company. He has to say the company is full of great engineers and incredible visionaries and incredible leaders, and they are going to move this company forward, and they are going to continue to deliver what you want, because I'm busy doing other things. I'm not even questioning whether I agree with what he's doing or not. That's irrelevant to this conversation. The problem is he has made the product, and worse, the brand, not about the promises and not about the delivery, but he's made it about himself. And that has caused all kinds of problems. Well, if you look at not simply Tesla, but look at a number of companies that have made statements and staked out positions that have then become unpopular. Bud Light, Chick-fil-A, Nike, and lots of others have taken one side or the other, and because of that have either paid the price, or in some cases it worked out to their advantage because they were able to build their businesses based on what they said with their values, based on who their customers were. In the case of Tesla, it's a rather odd dichotomy, because I think the people who would tend to buy Teslas, who care about environmental actions, who care about not using fossil fuels, also tend to vote the side of the aisle that Elon Musk does not support. So there's this enormous disconnect right there. I can't tell you whether you should put your values face forward in what you do or not. It depends on who you are, what your values are, how readily acceptable they are to your audience. What I can tell you is there needs to be clear congruency between who you are as a business owner, or a parent for that matter, and what you espouse, and then what you do. We've all had moms or dads who told us, don't tell me what you say, show me what you do, right? We all know that actions speak louder than words. And so there needs to be a thread between who you are, what you say, and what you do. That thread might please some people. It might upset other people. But if that thread is congruent and responds to who you are and who your audience is, then you're doing the right thing. If it's not, what you're doing is you're creating a confused message. And what happens when you create a confused message? People go elsewhere. People don't buy your products or your services. And if kids don't listen to their parents, you have to be consistent.
When it comes to the colleges, right? They're always looking for case studies to teach the students, do this, don't do this. Are they going to be case studies in colleges moving forward, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Each time something like this happens, good or bad, someone is going to dissect it over a long period of time, use lots of examples, and demonstrate what happened, because we have to look to these activities, these opportunities, to figure out what's the right way to handle this. Now, what happens with Tesla in the future, your guess is as good as mine. We don't know what's going to happen. What we do know is that they're going to have to fight long and hard to maintain the type of clients they've been doing business with. What's more, keep in mind that when they first started releasing electric cars, they were the only game in town. You didn't have a lot of other choices. They didn't have any of the things that the big automakers provide. They didn't have networks. They didn't have bench depth. They didn't have history. They didn't have any of those things, but they had something that was very unique. Now you can buy an electric car from Audi, Mercedes, Porsche, Subaru, Ford, GM, Chevy, Volkswagen. I could go on and on. So all of a sudden, their core competency is no longer a competitive advantage. Now you start looking at other things. And when you start looking at other things, you may or may not find that they stay competitive. And then what happens when the people who have supported them no longer want to have anything to do with them? Of course, this is a case study, because everything that's happening is showing how brands work, how easy it is, how hard it is to build them, and how easy it is to destroy them.
What should every founder or executive remember when they're becoming the face of the brand? Like, how do they protect both their identity and the brand's future when things go sideways?
So let me suggest, first of all, that they understand how important it is, exactly what you just said, that they are the face of the brand. I can't tell you how many CEOs I work with who say, oh, nobody knows who I am. It's just about the company. And then I start listing companies and I say, okay, tell me who the CEO is. The obvious ones, Apple and Microsoft and Oracle and Starbucks. And go through the list. And of course, you can name the CEOs of all of those companies. The values of a company come from the leader. Leadership changes, values sometimes change as well. So, first of all, they have to remember that they're in the public eye. Nowadays, of course, everyone has these magical devices that we carry around that have cameras and are connected to the internet. So everybody is a reporter. Everybody can put their commentary up there. I have 250,000 followers on LinkedIn. Imagine that level of power of being able to make a comment on something, whether I'm equipped to do it or not, and reaching those kind of numbers. Everybody can do that today. That means that we're all under increased scrutiny, and that means that these CEOs, these leaders have to be aware of that. There is no downtime. They're kind of like actors or actresses, who go to a bar or do something stupid, and the next day it's on TMZ, and a day later it's in People magazine, and then it's everywhere in the world. And you can think of all of these cataclysmic catalyst moments when one thing destroyed a reputation, one thing destroyed a career, one thing destroyed a company. They've got to be thinking about that all the time.
Do you have any closing comments, Laura, that you'd like to leave people with in terms of that increased scrutiny and that equating brands with trust?
Well, another way to think about branding is it's all reputation building. That's all it is. It's just, I love what Bruce was saying about consistency. To build a solid brand, you have to first discover what is at your core, what your values are, what you want to stand for, and then consistently deliver that promise and say things that help shape the perceptions you want to have around your brand. And it's not for the faint of heart, as we've just heard. A lot can go wrong, but if you are deliberate and intentional, and if you are always 5 steps ahead, you can pull off a beautiful brand that holds its promise to its customers.
Right. Well, I really want to thank you both for spending time with us here, talking about with your expertise and insights and brands getting in front of crisis and not losing the buying public's trust. Mostly, I'd like to thank our viewers as we discuss things that matter with people who care.